supported any decision we made, but definitely our president's always involved. But again, it just depends what the sport is before to determine who else outside the president's involved. But I think it's really important to have your support staff involved in that committee. So again, I would just say this as a lesson: just know that your support staff that you work with today are just as valuable for your future opportunities, because we call them if we know them, right? And our support staff will call them. So just know that.
I would just add, because I've had an opportunity to be, the right hand to an AD during a football search, and we had no one else in the process. I've had a couple of basketball searches where it's the AD, 2 advisors, and maybe the president wanting to meet the coach. And I've been a part of women's basketball and softball searches where, again, there's more of a committee. Many times, as Monique mentioned, the search firm, at least the way that we've approached it and me taking my notes, the search firm's going to help with the background checks, but really they're going to help with confidentiality and to make sure that the process can go smoothly and that, leaks don't come out as to who's interviewing. They can facilitate all the logistics. So it makes it a lot easier. The piece that I would caution, and I've learned.
I'm sorry, but I was on another Zoom. I couldn't tell which audio was working on me there for a second.
Oh, no, you're good. I'm sorry.
Dan, you got to put on mute, man.
Hey, folks, if people could mute their lines,
to
please.
be honest with you,
Coach Joe,
I was trying to forward your number.
Could people mute their lines, please?
Database that we have, and actually called you by accident, because I think Coach Hamilton's going to call your father here or call you tonight. So
Kevin, you should be able to mute him.
Whoever's the host can mute him. Kevin, you should be able to mute him.
Coach called your number yet or not, but Coach wants to say hello to you guys.
All right, sounds great.
All right. Marvin, please continue. Rogue operation here.
Yeah, so again, search firms going to help with confidentiality. And in terms of the president's been involved just to, again, understand who the candidate is, try to build that relationship on the front end.
I'm coming.
But it's been interesting in terms of the process of utilizing the search firm, because I've been involved where the search firm is pushing their list of candidates. Mm-hmm. And then I've been in a process where, I did a lot of the homework. And I said, well, what about these 5? What about these 6 that the search firm didn't have on their list? And so, again, every AD, every administrator is different in terms of how much research, how much time they have to do the research, and how they rely on the search firms. But I would just say be prepared that in some searches, again, your search firm's going to push you hard, but in others, it might be the sport administrator that's doing that homework that gets you in the room. So don't just automatically assume that all you have to do is get close to the search firms, because it's not that simple. Because I'm, again, personally, especially because I got a basketball background, I'm doing a lot more homework than maybe some other ADs.
Yeah, and both of you brought up great points, but for those of you that are looking to go to an institution or looking to be moved to an institution, it's important to do your homework on the institution as well, to not just know the athletic department, but know the culture, the values of an institution. So, for instance, we typically have a campus community and an athletics community that informs the search committee about the characteristics they're looking for. And then the search committee goes out and says, okay, here are the people that fit these criteria that you put. So as opposed to having a search committee go out and present a list of names, we sometimes approach a search with giving them information from a campus community and an athletics community, and then having them narrow down their list based on that. So searches, operate a lot of different ways, but I would say if you're interested in moving to another institution, before you go on an interview, before you get invited, it's definitely important to know the culture of that institution, that university.
Yeah, I'm going to add, I think, 2 more things. One is, and this is something that took me a little while to understand, is you really need to understand who's making the hire. Those are the people that you're going to start to build your network. when I was an assistant coach, I was networking with head coaches. And then I realized head coaches aren't hiring head coaches. ADs are. And so then you have to start to network with ADs. And so making sure that you're building a relationship with athletic administrators, because they are going to be the ones that are hiring. For the men's search that I did last year, I did work with a search firm, and while I was interviewing search firms, I kept asking, what value are you going to bring? And I think Marvin and Monique and Dr. Kenny dropped really, really good information on kind of whether or not there's going to be different types of search committees. There could be involvement from the greater community, the board of trustees, et cetera. I think the most compelling thing that a search firm said to me is, listen, our value is in the last hours of the search. And, when you're making a decision as an athletic director to drop, I don't know, $25, $50, $100,000 on a search, you want to know that you're going to get value. And when you're negotiating the contract at the end of the night, the search firm's having the conversation with the agent, which leaves the head coach and the AD out of it, right? And during that negotiation, the search firm obviously made more than they proved their value. And so for me not to have those conversations with the agent, for me not to have those conversations with the candidate, we don't want to start off our relationship that way. I felt that the search firm having that relationship with the agent and being able to communicate with the agent really proved their value with a men's basketball search. For other searches, we don't use search firms, but for men's basketball and probably for women's basketball, if I had to do it again, we would use a search firm.
Awesome. Fantastic insights from everybody. So let me follow up on the agent piece. So we talked about the pre-search, and we get to the stage and the news breaks and Twitter blows up and everybody knows the job is now officially open. Okay. And Marvin, you mentioned the idea of, reaching out to your network proactively, and Tanya, you mentioned the aspect of the agent interaction. What's your view on candidates reaching out to you directly? Does it help to be the first person to call? How many calls do you want about a particular candidate? Do you want any calls at all about a particular candidate? And then I think the second related piece to that is, can you get in the mix without an agent? I don't want to presume everybody on this call has an agent. So how important is it for somebody on this call who doesn't have one to identify and get representation so they can get into those dialogues? Is that crucial, or can they make their way in there without it?
So I'll give the perspective and some guidance that I received as I've tried to navigate the path of being an AD. And, the advice that I was given is, don't have your whole network, politic on your behalf. And you don't have to be the first person to be in that list and make that phone call immediately. I think it's quality over quantity in many instances where, and Tanya mentioned it, who's actually making the decision in the hiring process. And if you can find that out, can you identify one or two people that have a close relationship with that individual who's really making the decision, and have those individuals truly reach out on your behalf? Because again, as we're going through the search process, we're going to get calls from all over the place. And many times I'm turning my phone off to some degree unless I'm reaching out to someone to get some information on a candidate, because it can get overwhelming with how many calls you get. And so again, that's why in many instances we utilize the search firm to kind of drown out the noise. Because especially with a high profile search, I got a week to hire somebody. I mean, it's a quick process. And so, again, I don't have the opportunity to field every single phone call. But if that one person that I'm close with or I have a relationship with, if they reach out and say, this person I vouch for, that goes a long way in the process.
Yeah, and Mike, I want to touch on something you mentioned with agents is, for those of you that either have an agent or considering getting an agent, do your homework on the agent, because if that agent has multiple clients, you don't know if that agent's going to push for you. That agent may be pushing for another one of their clients, and little do you know that you're competing with somebody else that's represented by the same person. So make sure you do your homework on agents as well to know if you're represented by somebody that may be going after the same jobs as you, you don't know if you're going to be their priority or not.
I don't really have much to add to that. With the search that I was referring to earlier, I will just say that the Final Four did have representatives, and I think it's 3 were assistant coaches and 1 was a sitting head coach. And I think for the reasons that they mentioned earlier about using the search firms for confidentiality, and they have someone speaking on their behalf. So that's why I would suggest that you have 1, and then 2, to what Dr. Kenny said, like, God, I just lost my train of thought. But anyways, they were able to connect with me, and I'm gonna filter how many conversations I have. So if it's a reputable, that's where I was going. If it's a reputable search firm for sure, or a representative like an agent, or I think like a lot of them just call themselves representatives, especially on the women's basketball side. I'm not sure if they even refer to themselves as agents, but they, I have relationships with them. So there's going to be certain ones that I, will listen to more than others. And you have to know sometimes it's not personal, right? Because again, it depends on who's making the decision, what people believe is the best for the position. At the end of the SMU search, my boss and I were on 2 different ends. We had 2 different opinions about who should be our head coach. But what I was able to do is I went back to our profile that we created at the beginning of the search. We created a profile. Here are the 10 things that we think are absolutely important for this position at this time. And so when we went back to that profile, because I talked to my boss, I said, here's what you said, here's what we agreed that we needed. And this person checks 9 of the 10 boxes. This person checks 2 of the 10 boxes, right? And so that's how we came to our ultimate decision. But just know that a lot of times it's not personal. You may think I can do the job. I've done these things, but there's certain intangibles that you may not even be aware of that's needed, that we believe is needed. But I do believe in representation, again, just so they should be skilled enough to know when to call and how often to call. And you just have that one person calling for you, that sometimes that's enough. And then if we find you to be a valuable candidate, we're going to do some additional homework.
All excellent points. I think one thing for all of us to remember is we're in the business of people. And so I personally believe that you should all do some research and get an agent. I think that agents out there now are they're doing just great professional development programs. And I find that they're a tremendous asset. I might be one of the only ADs that tells you to go get an agent, but I find that they're helpful, and I think they're really great for professionals. But we are in the business of people. And so really figuring out how you can connect the dots is critical. And if that's with your agent, or somebody at another institution that has that personal connection, if anything ever opened at GW, you can call Kevin Sutton, who's going to call me, and now you've linked the dots. And so I think those really direct connections are important.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for those
I
perspectives.
would say this last thing, make sure your agent knows they work for you. They represent you, right? So if it's not your style, make sure they understand your style as well and the way you want things to be done, because you don't want them to misrepresent you as well, because that can be discouraging. I just had a situation where a person made contact with an AD, but then because of a personal relationship called the SWA as well, and that totally threw the AD off, because she's like, they had a foot in the door, and now their agent went and called this additional person on my staff, and now I'm not going to talk to them, right? So make sure you know what your agent's doing for you, and just make sure you agree with it.
Excellent, fantastic guidance. So we talked about the different paths into the process, and we've talked about the role of the search firm, the importance of agent, and the different perspectives on agents. But you reach a stage as an administrator where you've got to start making decisions. Who do I want to talk to? Who do I want to bring in and sit with in an interview? Who do I want to get to know on a personal basis? So what are the criteria, really high level criteria and characteristics you're looking for? And in particular, what are the separators that you look for as it relates to choosing candidate A over candidate B over candidate C as you go through a search in general?
I'll start here. Just so I was in the room when we had a transition process from a head men's basketball coach to a new head men's basketball coach, and some of the things that they talked about were looking at past possible transgressions. So because we have to run things through through the UC Regents, there were coaches that were high on our list as far as wins, as far as their background and things like that, but we had to cross them off our list because violations and other things, the UC Regents wouldn't approve them. So I'd say also when you're thinking about schools or thinking about where you want to go for the coaches that are on this call, it's important to know, as I mentioned earlier, the culture, but to be able to explain sometimes if there were things that happened in the past, because we did reach out to some of those coaches to say, hey, we just have to talk to you about this because we want you on our list, but we have to be able to explain this to the UC Regents. So being able to communicate that, I think, is extremely important. So I'd say for a school that's running things through a board of trustees or regents, being able to explain anything from the past that may come up, just it's important to be able to have open and honest communication about that.
I would add that, you know, I'm looking for a CEO of a program, someone that can manage the entire business unit of men's basketball. And so that's first and foremost. And obviously we're going to do our research there, but then I start asking some very basic questions. And Monique and others mentioned kind of the profile that you put together on the front end, but I start asking questions about, you know, I'm in this because of education. So are the coaches that we're interviewing, are they focused on player development and making the student athletes better, not just athletically, but also academically and in life? Obviously, can they recruit and get players and build relationships? I'm asking about what's their style of play? You know, being in the ACC, you know, we have some of the best coaches in the country, and those that have had the longevity have had unique styles of play to be competitive. And so I'm trying to see, you know, if it's an assistant coach, who have they coached with? What's the style of play there? We alluded to it earlier. Are they a great teammate? You know, are they going to be somebody that is going to be great in the department? Are they going to show up to meetings on a regular basis? And are they somebody that I feel like I can talk to on a regular basis? Compliance and the transgressions and the background of, you know, have they had any issues in the past? That stuff we'll ask. But then for me, my kind of guiding principle is I have an 8-year-old son. And would I trust my 8-year-old son with this candidate or with this individual that we're trying to bring in? And that's something that has stuck with me, that if I don't trust, you know, that you're going to take care of my son in a great way, in a great fashion, and set him up, then I wouldn't want that person a part of the search.
Yeah, I love when you said that, Marvin. I was thinking about my current men's coach with his, at the time, probably 6-year-old son, thinking, I'm going to trust this guy. But that's a huge piece of it. For athletic directors, how we do with our football coaches, our men's basketball coaches, and our women's basketball coaches is how we are going to do in our career. And so I'm trying to figure out if I can trust this person with my career. And you know, I think about things like authenticity. Obviously, we talked about integrity, but I also want to know that this coach wants my job, wants the job at my institution, and not just any head coaching job. And so when I think about the searches, the things that really separate people is when they're talking about the intricacies and what makes this job be the job that they really want. And so I think we've talked about this a little bit, but really understanding what the mission of the university is, understanding what the president's vision is. If there are strategic plans, read through the president's strategic plan, read through the athletic department's strategic plan, try to understand, you know, what are people that are graduating from that institution going on to do, because you want to be able to speak to that. You want the AD to feel like you want that job, not just a job.
Awesome. So I would point out, so we're about 45 minutes into the conversation, and I think Marvin's comment about style of play might be the first comment we've heard that gets close to the basketball court. So you can tell as you listen to the comments of the group how important all of these other things that surround the program, surround being a CEO of the program, really are, and the extent to which parents are entrusting their children and their futures to you as a head coach, and that type of thing. Very, very important. So appreciate those comments for sure. A couple more, and then I want to open it up to the group for their own questions, and open up to the group in total. So, there's a comment about being a good teammate. And so you've screened your people out. You say, hey, I'm going to bring in, let's say 8 to 10 for a Zoom meeting, or 8 to 10 for an airport interview, or whatever your number might be. What are the key topics you're touching on? And if you care to share them, what is your go-to question or questions where you go, the answer to this question is really going to give me a really clear picture about whether or not this person is the right person for this. Not to say they're going to get the job, but to stay in the mix. This is a separator question for me about how somebody answers that.
This is the stumper. This was the stumper question. Lately I've been reading a lot of Patrick Lencioni, who wrote books like 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And he wrote a book called Ideal Team Player. And so I'm really big in his concept of having humble, hungry, and smart individuals. And so I ask questions that try to draw out if somebody is humble, hungry, and smart. And I think one of the things that we're challenged with is talking about the things that we've done really well without sounding like we're an egomaniac. And so I try to ask questions to see if they'll take ownership of things, and if they've got a good balance of I versus we, because I think you have to have both. There's things that are we things that you've done with the collective, the team, and there's things that are I things, and being able to talk through that as a candidate is something that I'll do as an interviewee or interviewer to see if somebody's humble. So it's just an idea to get us started.
I would just add, because I don't think there's one specific question that's a separator, but I would say, especially with assistant coaches trying to transition to be a head coach, I want, to Tanya's point, I want you to own some things. Like, what have you done? Tell some stories about what you've had a part in terms of the success of the program. Because again, Tanya mentioned it, there's a number of we things. We did this as a program. We did X, Y, and Z, but I want to get to know you. I want to get to know what your experiences are. And the questions that I'm asking are going to see, are you giving me the philosophical basketball 101 answers and the things that you think I want to hear? Or are you telling me stories about experiences that you've had and what you've learned from them, what you've garnered from them, how you would do something differently or do something the same? Like, I'm really trying to better understand you as an individual and what your experiences are versus your philosophies on how you might handle something.
For me, like, work-life balance is so important to me. And I know in the world of coaching, I think people still struggle with that, because even we do sometimes as administrators. But it's kind of like that question when you're dating, you always want to know how a man treats his mother, right? So I always want to know your commitment to your family and whatever that dynamic is. And I can't really ask you about your family throughout the search, but it'll come up, right? And I always want to know, like, it could be your mom, your dad, whoever it is. I just kind of like to know what family means to people. And even, what does your friendships mean to you? So, because it's like Tanya said earlier, we're in the people business, but also I know, how do you treat people? How do you care about people? What do they mean in the grand scheme of this? But especially for those of us who have families, I feel like our most successful coaches have been those who have engaged their families in their work. I encourage our coaches to take their families on trips. Now, you wouldn't have to, but I just said that just means something to me. Again, knowing your administrators, knowing what's important to them. So if you're ever interviewing with me, to mention family, right? So, but something about how people treat their families and where they see them in this part of their life is meaningful to me.
Yeah, I think everybody touched on great stuff. The other thing I would say is, as an administrator, I want to be as transparent as possible when you're going through the interview process. So some of the questions, that I might ask thinking of UCLA is, we're competing with the Clippers, the Rams, we're competing with all of these other things that are in town. What is something that you think innovatively might bring people out to come see, a UCLA basketball game? So starting with that. And then another thing, again, I'll go back to the admissions piece, is we have certain restrictions on admission. So as a coach, what is your recruiting style? What are you looking for? What type of students do you like to bring in? But also having not, Marvin touched on, there's philosophical answers that coaches can give you, but I'm looking for specific examples of how they've dealt with, admissions issues or bringing in fans, dealing with donors, things of that nature. I want to hear tangible things where in the past you faced those same challenges and how you were able to overcome those challenges.
Fantastic.
Michael, real
ahead,
quick,
Tanya, please,
if it's okay. And
Please.
Dr. Kenny made me think of something. And I remember hearing this from Whit Babcock, who's the AD at Virginia Tech. And he talked about how many AD searches he was in and didn't get it until he finally got Cincinnati prior to Virginia Tech. And he said, I called all my friends that had interviewed for AD's jobs. I asked them what questions people asked. And he had a binder of questions that presidents had asked in AD searches. And I think that's important because anything's on the table. When you think about that point about like, how are you going to compete with the Clippers and the Lakers? And it's like, I wouldn't have thought of that prior to being in the seat that I'm in. But I asked the exact same question during my men's basketball search. I'm like, listen, we're in a crowded market, where we've got professional athletics. I compete with politics, right? And so I asked the question, how are we going to get people to come to GW basketball games? And so I think it's important to ask people that have been a part of searches, what questions they've been asked, maybe even just poll, like what's the most fascinating far out question you've been asked? Because you got to prepare for it.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing those, for sure. So I want to follow up with one more question, and then I want to open it up to the group. So the question, and I don't know that the word has been used in the course of this conversation, but often, if there's people on this Zoom who've been in interview situations and they don't get the job, the default answer often seems to be fit. We went with somebody who was a better fit. Pretty vague, pretty nondescript. And so I'd ask each of you, four panelists, what does fit mean to you? And in particular, what does it mean at your campus? How do you define that? And is that a universal truth, or does that vary from place to place?
I'll jump in and say, obviously fit is subjective, but I think we've talked about it before. Where's the program right now? What do we feel like those student athletes need to be successful? Where are we, financially? Where are we academically? All the things around the program, we're going to build that profile based on kind of the status of the program at that point in time. So I think, as we're looking at making those decisions, it's really important for us to do that assessment. And then from there, from my perspective, and I'm learning, because again, I've interviewed for AD jobs, and I've had that feeling of shit, I didn't get it. And they told me the same thing. And many people have just said, it's literally not you as a person. And it's not something to take personal. The timing might not have been right, or your skill set might not have been exactly what they needed in that moment. And that, if you keep at it and keep trying, the secret sauce will come together to where your passions, your skill set, your strengths align with what that institution needs at that moment. And so again, I've experienced that disappointment, but also recognize that fit is so subjective, and I try my best not to take that personal.
Yeah, I think when you're talking about a school like UCLA, and Coach Dwayne Broussard is on here. So Coach Broussard was an assistant when I worked over there. So I'm preaching to the choir with him. But there are UCLA fans, and there are UCLA people that still have the belief of Coach Wooden, who won numerous titles, 10 and 12 years, and some people look to that model. So when we're talking about when fit, we're a school that because of violations, we fired Jim Herrick a year after he won a national championship. So there are a lot of things where some schools may hire someone or look at someone that's win at all costs. And I think UCLA, there's this dichotomy of we want you to win, but we want you to do it with integrity. We want you to do it a certain way. And it's not that coaches that we've interviewed and haven't hired haven't had that, but we want to know, how are you going to deal with if you're not winning and fans have certain expectations? So fit comes with, how have you dealt with challenges in the past? How have you dealt with not winning in the past? And how has your demeanor or attitude been? Were you the type to jump to another school or look to jump to another school? Are you the type to stick with it and kind of gut it out and do the best that you can? So fit is so subjective, but I think especially at schools like, Duke and other schools that have a history of winning, it's extremely important to know that that fit is not necessarily the same as other fits across the country.
Tanya or Monique, please.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add, and those are all really excellent points, is because fit is so subjective. I've found, this is where I found agents to be really helpful, is an agent should keep you out of a search where you potentially are not a good fit. And so I rely really heavily on agents to help me with that. They've got the people that they're representing. I'm trying to be as clear as I can on the profile of the job at the time. Give me candidates that fit that. And so I think that's one thing. The only other thing, and I think Marvin said this really well, like fit is a thing, and you might not get a job because of fit, but don't take it personally. Figure out what you did really well in that interview. Figure out what you need to get better at in the interview, and keep working on yourselves, and just recognize, like, I'm like one of those believers, like the right job's going to happen at the right time. And if you believe that and you continue to focus on getting better, then it will.
I don't have anything to add. Marvin's answer was perfect. And Tanya kind of summarized it too. It's very subjective. And at the beginning, when I was interviewing, I was very discouraged by that word and did take it personally. But I had to quickly realize, so I wouldn't be discouraged to go after more jobs, is that it is, it's not personal. And when I did the search, the last search at SMU, that's when I really realized, like, I created a profile and I identified someone who I thought fit that profile. So we all do it. And unfortunately, sometimes we're on the other end of it. So I wouldn't take it personal.
Awesome. Fantastic. So let's open it up to the group. We've got a lot of experience. We've got a lot of people with questions on their mind. Please throw it out there and put it out to people and see, let's see what we get for some additional responses.
I wanted to ask a question kind of about.
Mike, introduce yourself, please.
Okay, Mike Lopez, Creative Coaching Podcast. Currently I'm an athletic director and a head basketball coach in San Antonio, Texas at a private school. And my question for y'all is kind of based on kind of the cultural climate right now and how we're looking at just this divide racially. And y'all feel any pressure that's out there to hire minority coaches? Or is it still kind of you're keeping the same protocol? How's that working for y'all in y'all space?
Can I please jump in here? Because I got to talk. So I got hired. I mentioned I got hired 6 months ago. I'm the first Black administrator at UCLA in athletics at this level. So within 6 months, we have a predominantly white coaching staff that now has a Black administrator at my level, and we just hired a Black AD 2 weeks ago. So, we, for a school like UCLA that's looked at as, very progressive and very forward thinking, I think we're going to undergo some major shifts, not in personnel necessarily, but just in culture internally in the conversations we're having. And students have already talked about how conversations are shifting. I'm the chair of our Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Committee, and we were having conversations before Ahmed Arbery. We're having conversations before Breonna Taylor, before George Fields. We were having these conversations, but they hadn't happened before myself got there or Martin as our AD got there. So I know your question was specifically around hiring, but I directly oversee 4 Olympic sports, and all of my sports are predominantly white. And the conversation I'm having with our head coaches is when assistant coaching positions are opening, instead of just going with the candidates that you've always gone with, we're going to have a conversation about why you're choosing this candidate, what was the pool you chose from, where did you post the job if it was posted, and I'm having a conversation with this person before they come here. So as a coach, you can make your own staff, but I just want to make sure that this person fits with the values of what we're doing. So I think that a lot of institutions you'll start to see undergo shifts in not just head coach hires, but assistant coaching hires, and I think that that's important.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I'm gonna jump in. I had a great conversation with somebody today that's on the call, Herb Courtney, who is busy launching his search his search firm. And we had a good conversation about what we are doing in the industry in terms of being more intentional about our hires. And I had a chance to be on the 360 program that GW did back at the beginning of the month, and I had shared some data, and it's like we can't honestly look ourselves in the mirror and pretend that we're doing even an average job with our hires. We're doing a horrible job with our hires. And so, my conversation with Herb today was, what are the things that we can do at my institution to improve the process, from the writing of the job description to what Dr. Kenny said, like thinking about where we are posting things, thinking about how you establish a search committee. I know we talked about that, but who's sitting on your search committee? And just, we have to be better. And I don't think, if Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and George Floyd have woken us up, well, that's good, but we're late to the party on this, and we've got to do a better job. And admittedly, I felt like I was doing a good job with my post, and then I looked, I was like, I have 2 Black head coaches. I'm like, this is ridiculous. We've got to do a better job. And so I don't think of it as pressure. I think we want to be more excellent at the work that we're doing. And we are serving a really diverse population group in our student athletes, and our assistant and head coaching and administrative demographics do not match our student athletes at all. And so we've all got to get better at it. And I'm going to continue to have my conversation with Herb. And I told him, I was like, I'm going to figure out a way to bring you into GW, and then I'm going to just continue to throw your name out there, because we need more people in the search business doing intentional work around hiring diverse candidates.
And I would just add, I think, for me, I have a personal obligation to not just, now that I'm in the room, to not just push our AD and push our systems, but also to find opportunities to pull people forward, pull people up. And so whether it's this call or even with some of our assistant coaches, how can I get them prepared so that when the search process does happen, they know what questions that are going to be asked. They have an idea of, the experiences they need to talk and discuss. I'm also trying to talk with my head coach, who's a white male, for his minority assistant coaches. Hey, coach, are you allowing them to do more than just recruit? Are you giving them chances to be in the room when we're having a budget conversation? Those little moments go a long way, on top of, again, the hiring process and protocols. Some of it is just, I got to get folks ready. And I want somebody to do that for me in terms of sitting in the AD chair. So I'm trying to give back in that same way.
Jermaine Johnson, Troy University. This has been a great dialogue. This panel, it's been amazing thus far. But I have a question far too often we've been talking about, I've been on a lot of Zoom calls, been at Top Connect. We've ushered in the conversation in regards to racism, but we rarely talk about sexism. And what I mean by that is you can have a woman head basketball coach, and a lot of women head basketball coaches can be single, but it's very rarely that a Division I or Division II head men's basketball coach are single. You know what I mean? Penny Hardaway's probably one. I know Will Wade was hired as a single Caucasian, and a couple more. But on the women's side, it's a majority of the Division I women coaches are single. And so I think we never talk about sexism because we get to talking about family. Well, we don't talk about it on the women's side. Can you guys elaborate on that?
That's a really good point, Jermaine. And that's why earlier when I talked about family, I talked about whatever that means to you, right? It could be your mom, dad, because I do believe when I got in coaching some years ago, I remember one of my coaches jokingly said, I was told I need to get married so I can get a job. And that was 20-something years ago. And I just didn't understand that. But, Tanya, you might be able to speak to this more, but I just thought that was kind of weird. But you're right. That's, and when I hired a coach for at SMU, it ended up being a male, but I'm not sure if I consciously even consider that he had a family. I'm not sure because he had one, so it wasn't important. But I wonder if I would have thought differently if he didn't, especially putting him to lead young women, right? I don't know, but that's a good point. I'd like to really know what the panelists have to say about that.
I would just caution about using the term sexism, referring to a single man, because what you're saying, Jermaine, let me just get this right. You're saying, how come single men have it tougher than women who have families?
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah,
I was saying is a woman that doesn't have a family, don't want to be married, not interested in being married, but she's a great leader of women, have great integrity, has a big time skill set, and can impact lives. But she's not interested in being married to anyone. So I know the dictionary may say women, but it's also referred to as both male and female when you talk about sexism. It's a prejudice. It's a discriminatory term.
Right. So discrimination or prejudice, and I think that goes back to what we talked about earlier when we said fit. A lot of people that are the decision makers decide what a good fit is. So they're saying, I want someone that has a family, that's oriented. And you're saying, how come that exists in women's sports, but you don't see that same kind of bias in men's sports?
Absolutely.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Cool. Okay.
Yes.
And I'll just throw out there, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but I think there's someone that's a single male in Atlanta. I'm just going to use Atlanta as an example. I know that there's thoughts, whether that's our president, whether it's our AD, whether that's myself or others, the risk factor of, is that single male going to be hanging out in Atlanta? Is that single male going to be making the decisions that we feel great about? And that's a bias, that's a prejudice, that's wrong, 100%. But I do think there's that automatic, this person's single, living in Atlanta, what does that mean for us? And if that question comes up, then many times, not that the person wouldn't be hired, not that the person wouldn't be a part of the process, but that's one of the question marks that maybe an AD or a president has to overcome.
So let me ask you this. Great point. So you're saying, as an administrator, it's okay for a woman to go to an event and mingle, but it's not okay for a male to do so.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that there are questions that people ask during the search process. There's questions that, candidates have to overcome when you build the profile. Is family something that's in the profile? No. But when a candidate comes, and again, a city like Atlanta, I do know that I've had conversations, and now that you brought it up, I need to fight that. But I've had conversations with a president and an AD that said, ooh, the person's single, living in Atlanta. What are they going to be doing? Are they going to be out? Do they want to be married? And if that's the case, are they going to be out trying to find somebody in Atlanta, or are they?
The unfortunate part, those biases exist, and I would say this, and I don't know how you do it with this particular question, but I know our coach at SMU, he would be okay with me saying this. He knew there was questions we would have about him being a male coach of a women's sport, a head coach of a women's sport, and he shared some things immediately. Like, I know this is a question. I can't change that I'm a man. Like, he said that. I can't do this, but this is what I'm going to do. So because some of those questions that you know kind of are in people's minds that you know we can't ask, if you feel like that might be a challenge, and you can work through your relationships or your agents who maybe figure out if you should or shouldn't ask those or bring that information up. But he addressed some things that he knew may be an issue for us, so that we, instead of leaving it up to us to guess, right? So that may be something for you too, if you were to interview for a job in Atlanta or a city like Atlanta, DC or something of the sort, and you say, I know I'm a single man, whatever it is, you can address that because it's out there, and unfortunately we're human, so those things exist, those questions exist in our mind. And I'm not saying particularly any of us on the panel, but I'm saying we have certain questions. And like I said, the head coach was he was like, look, I can't change that I'm a male, and I can't change these things about me, but here's how I can make you feel more comfortable about it. So.
Yeah.
There's a question. Next question, Russ Williamson.
This is Russ Williamson at Tennessee State. Thank you guys for being on. Michael, you did a fantastic job moderating. But one of the questions I had, we talked about the beginning, the middle of the process, getting to it. My question is at the end, when we've interviewed, and the last question that ADs always ask is, do you have any questions for us? What are some of the best questions that have left a mark on you guys as ADs when someone's finished their interview that they've asked?
I want to jump in here. I don't know that I want to give away my best interview questions to ask, but I will say this. I can tell you, don't ask what is my budget. That is a level of detail that I think is probably irrelevant. Do you have what you need? Do you have what you need in context of your program, in the context of the conference that you're in? If it starts to be all about dollars, and the only way you can get there is to spend your way to success, I think for a lot of programs that might be a challenge. That's not a direct answer to your question, other than to say I wouldn't ask about budget. And I guess I'll throw one thing out. I would say I'm always big on culture. We haven't had a lot of conversation about culture, but each one of you in a head coaching role and an assistant coaching role are creating very intentional cultures, and understanding walking into that job, the culture that you are inheriting, I think is crucial. If you're inheriting a dumpster fire, you probably need to know that. If you're inheriting a really good program, or there's pieces of the program that are in good shape, you probably need to know that. Budget might be something, better way to ask about budget is, tell us about your institution's financial health right now. What's your enrollment like? If it's an enrollment management driven school, what are the resources going to be? Because not every building is going to have 15, 20,000 people in it. You might be going to a job that's got 2,500 in attendance, and you've got to figure out other ways to bring in revenue. So those types of questions would be some suggestions I'd throw out there.
One of my mentors told me, Russ, that you do a lot of prep for an interview, and sometimes you go through an interview and some of the things that you're like, I wish they had asked this because I would have nailed it, when they didn't ask you. You get to the end of the interview, so they taught me sometimes ask that question that they didn't ask. So in some way word it to where they ask you that question, and then you can give them the feedback that you were hoping to provide during the interview. I just know from experience, there's a lot of times I've prepared for an interview and I felt like if they asked me this question, I should be able to nail it. And the question wasn't asked, but I felt like I was so prepared. I had to get this answer out, especially as I started gathering information to seeing what was important to them. And I wanted to make sure they knew that before I left the interview. So as opposed to just blurting something out at the end, I asked them a question that led them to ask me something back that allowed me to answer that way. And I don't know if that.
Dr. Kenny, I'm writing that one down. That's awesome. I think one of the things that it's a question I appreciate is when somebody says, how can I help you be successful in executing on your vision? Because you want to let them know that you understand that you're a partner in their effort. So that's a question that when it's asked, I'm like, all right, this person's serious about being a teammate in this venture.
Next question, Sean Coloris.
Hi, everybody. Sean Coloris from the City College of New York. I just finished my first year as the head coach here, and I was curious on your advice for assistant coaches who are transitioning to that first head coaching job. What are some things that you've noticed that have helped them be successful? What are some common pitfalls that they have gone through? Certainly made a lot of mistakes this year, a lot of growing opportunities. So just curious on your thoughts as I'm going into year 2.
I would say that, you don't have to know every single thing. And going back to being a good teammate, that relying on your AD, relying on your sport administrator, I think can be a win. And for those that don't, I think it's a failure to just run your program by yourself and not engage and not be a good teammate. And to Tanya's point, to not try to figure out how to enhance the mission of the institution and the priorities of the athletic department. I've seen people win the interview, and then once they get on board, all they care about is basketball, and they're not asking any other questions. And again, even through the basketball process, they're not engaging with their sport administrator or AD to just let them know, hey, here's what I'm thinking in terms of hiring my staff. Here's what I'm thinking in terms of X, Y, and Z. And many times your sport administrator or your AD can give you perspective and maybe some maybe landmines that you might want to be mindful of as you're hiring folks. One thing I love about Coach Passner, Josh Passner at Georgia Tech, when we brought him on board, he didn't hire his staff right away. He came in and said, okay, Marvin, Mike Babinski was the AD at that time. Here's the profiles that I'm looking for. Here are the people that I'm thinking about interviewing. And when I tell you that helped build so much trust, that trust is even, it's manifested itself in a lot of challenging situations we've been in the past 4 or 5 years, but he started off so strong because he leaned in and asked for help and didn't just come in and say, I need this, I need X, Y, and Z, here's my staff, and I got to have this budget to be successful. He came in and said, let me ask some questions and let me get some guidance from those that are in the department.
Next question, Justin Brandon.
I just wanted to ask you all, I know everybody really kind of hit on culture and, culture being a big part and obviously buying into the department. I was just wondering, what activities have you done within the athletic department to build that team cohesion, the whole department's cohesion, so this way everybody feels like, like you talked about with the swim, the dive team, and the track, and the teams that don't bring in the multi-million dollars, how do they fit into the athletic department to feel like, when I come in and I sit in this meeting, it's not just for show. Like I have, a seat at this table as well.
I'll be honest and transparent, Justin. I think that's one of the biggest challenges we have had. And, as our new AD comes on board, one of the things that we've explained is in our race to build facilities, within the last 5 to 7 years, we have a new football facility. We have a new basketball facility. It's actually siloed our athletes to where football players typically hang in their building, basketball players typically hang in their building. and our Olympic sport athletes are divided from that. So, you know, I'm going to answer your question with saying that that's one of the things that I think we need to do a better job of, is having all of our athletic department become a community, because even our athletics administration building is separate. So I worked here 15 years ago, and football was in our building. And since I left and came back, football has their own building. So where we used to bump into the football coaches, you'd see them in the coffee room, you'd see them around. You don't see the football coaches as much now, so it does feel kind of separate. So I'd say that's something that we really need to work on. But in the 6 months I've been here, we've had you know, our holiday party, and we've had some other things where it brought the group together. But I think one of the things our new athletic director is thinking about is exactly what you said. How do we build this community and this family when people are housed in different buildings?
Thank you very much, Coach. I appreciate that.
Kevin, if I can add to that.
Yeah, please do.
You know, I think some of the, you know, the challenge will vary from department to department. I mean, you've got some departments that'll have, you know, 50, 60, 70, 80 staff members. You know, I'm at Penn State, you know, we've got 400, and they're spread across multiple miles, and gosh, it's got to be a dozen different buildings. So the ability to build some of those types of relationships can be challenged for sure. But what I would encourage is, you know, the conversation, the phrase we used before, I think by Monique and maybe others, was be a good teammate. And you're probably going to be on a staff and in a department where you're surrounded by, or at least have some other coaches where you can learn things from them. So somebody who's a successful conference champion level head coach in soccer or field hockey or cross country or whatever it might be, talk to that person. They're having similar challenges, you know, reach out to them and pick their brain about dealing with issues with athletes, pick their brain about staff management, pick their brain about travel arrangements. You know, you walk into a job for the first time, they're going to the same conference place as you are. You don't want to go stay at the, you know, at the Westin that isn't as good as you think it is. And because you always stay at the Westin, and they're like, oh, look, the people over at the Courtyard take unbelievable care of us. Like, you know, don't relearn and don't make the errors others have made. Learn from those errors, avoid the challenge, and put yourself in a situation for success, and build those relationships. Have people who root for you around the department. That's a huge way to do it, and that takes time. It takes effort, and sometimes you're like, man, I got a lot to do. But there's a lot of smart people in this business, and I'll tell you what, sitting on this call today, I mean, I'm amazed at the questions, and I'm loving every answer I hear. I'm like, that's a great point. That's a great point. That's a great point. Your department probably has lots of people like that. And if you're an assistant, go talk to those people. They would welcome the chance to hear, to give advice. I'm sure they would. So.
Mike, if I can add something real quick, something I just thought about to Justin's question. I'm in charge of professional development in our department. And what Zoom has actually allowed us to do is we do professional development for coaches. And our coaches, because of this Zoom format, have actually interacted, they said, more across team than they ever have before. So our professional development a lot of times is voluntary, but we'll have a football assistant coach sign up along with a rowing coach, along with a tennis coach. And I work with the people facilitating, and I say, hey, make sure that when you break into small breakout groups, don't put all the same coaches from the same team together. Split them up. And the feedback I've got from coaches is they never would have interacted with these coaches just because of where their offices are. And now they've actually built an assistant coach community where they have a happy hour every week. They meet and they discuss professional development on their own. So I think this Zoom format, even though it's not ideal, has actually allowed us to do some things to bring people together that wasn't there before.
Kenny, since you're in charge of professional development, I'm going to tell you right now, you should have some of your coaches go to Russ's Zoom. You should have several of your coaches reach out to Stan Jones. And, you know, of course, you should send them all to right here to Living Trophies if they really want to grow as a professional, because we do big things here, as you can see. But we're going to end right now. We're going to have each of our panelists, starting with Tanya Vogel, if you could just leave us with some parting words, and then we're going to wrap it up, okay?
Yeah, I said it before, it's a people business. So I should hear from every single one of you, and we should start to get to know each other, because at some point you're going to open a door for me, or I'm going to open a door for you. And so don't be shy. I mean, it's one of my favorite things, and COVID's given us an opportunity to be on Zoom calls all the time. But I went to the office the other day, and the number of note cards I got, I was like, this is awesome. These are just people that I'm going to connect with. And so I just encourage you to reach out. Don't be bashful. Networking is so critical, and you hear it all the time. And I say this often, it's not who you know, but who knows you. And so the more you get to know us, the more we can help you, and vice versa. So thanks so much for inviting me and let me be a part of this.
Thank you so much, Tanya. Marvin Lewis.
Yeah, I'll leave you guys similar to what Tanya said. Obviously, networking is important, but I also would look at quality over quantity. And for me, there's nothing like breaking bread. So there's an opportunity, or when we get past COVID and have a chance to connect, whether it's coffee, breakfast, lunch, anybody's in town in Atlanta, feel free to reach out. Because I really appreciate the times where I can truly get to know you, and not just pass in an airport or be at a conference and you're passing me your business card. And I also want to share more about myself. So just, again, quality over quantity. And to Tanya's point, it's about who knows you and who can be a sponsor for you. And as we navigate, the future, if I can help in any way, if I can build a bridge for you, just let me know.
Fantastic. Marvin, I'm extremely proud of you. You exemplify what a living trophy is. And you're going to be an athletic director very, very soon. And whoever you represent is going to be very, very fortunate to have you as leading their athletic program. Very proud of you. Kenny Donaldson, Dr. Kenny Donaldson.
So, Tanya and Marvin, just it's been an honor and a pleasure to be on this panel with both of you. I'll be reaching out to both of you as well, just to get to know each other better. But one of the things I would say to this group is right now we're at a very, very pivotal point in athletics. Things are changing. There's going to be a lot because of COVID, because like someone mentioned, the racial and social unrest that's going on in the world. The best thing and the best piece of advice I can give you as a coach is not to just focus on the X's and O's, but focus on what's going on in society, focus on what's going on specifically in athletics, and broaden your horizons. Because as we all mentioned, we're looking, especially as administrators, for people that aren't just focused on being an X's and O's coach. We're looking for people that know about what's going on, are able to communicate with their student athletes, and are able to be a great teammate. And part of that is knowing where athletics is going, where society is going, and where that intersection lies with student athlete welfare. So I would just say, broaden the reading that you do, broaden the people you reach out to, and that's the best professional advice I could give you.
Dr. Kenny Donaldson, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for sharing your time, your knowledge, and more importantly than anything else, thank you very much for your friendship. And our Living Trophy Zoom you just talked about it. That's what we do. We don't really talk too much about X and O. We talk about, the A, B's, and C's under the Roman numerals, because we're trying to grow pros, because we got pros on here, but we're trying to make them all professionals. So thank you very much for coming on, and you added to us tonight. And then we're going to close it with Dr. Michael Cross, who I think we all will agree did a tremendous job at hosting this panel. So Dr. Cross, if we could have your closing remarks, we would greatly appreciate it.
Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate everybody being on. I thought the questions afterward were great. And, look, the ability to do this well is 100% dependent on the panel. And, Tanya, Marvin, Monique, and Dr. Kenny, just fantastic, insightful, deep answers. And this, I thought this went really well, and it's due to them. So, what I would say as a closing comment is you've heard a lot of things. And, I think everybody on this panel is in situations where, they want to mentor people. They want to try and advance them in various ways. And what I would say to everybody on this call is take an action step. You've heard a lot of things today, and I don't know what that action step is for you. It might be, I've got to do a better job building relationships in the department. I've got to polish up some aspects of my relationships. I've got to figure out whether my agent's the right agent or if I'm going to get an agent. There could be a whole variety of things, but there was a wide and comprehensive array of things here. Make a commitment tonight, to take an action step in some direction that advances your professional career, advances you as a person. And then the last thing I would say is be kind to yourself. We're all competitive people. We all want to find our way to a head job or an AD job or whatever it might be. And those things aren't always within our control. There's a lot of great people on this call who have unbelievable futures ahead of them. And it may not necessarily happen at the time you think it should, but trust and believe in yourself, trust and believe in your faith in God that you're going to get there and find your way there. So, I appreciate everybody's time. This has been an awesome evening, and I hope we can do it again in the near future. So thank you, Kevin. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. It's a special group you've got here for sure.
Absolutely, and especially because you're a tremendous part of it. In closing, as always, want to thank everybody for their time, for coming on. Thursday night at 7:00 is prime time, and for everyone that this is their first time on Living Trophies, thank you for coming on. Our mission is to impact as many lives we possibly can through this game of basketball and create living trophies. So continue to be that ladle that pours into people's buckets. Want to leave you with this quick quote: a legacy is not leaving something for people, it's leaving something in people. So continue to be blessed, continue to be safe, and I'll see everybody back here next Thursday. Take care. God bless.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all so much.
Coach. Good stuff.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Coach.
Absolutely.
And Kev, thank you as usual. You're the man.
Bill. Good to see you, boy.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Oh,
Thanks,
man.
Kevin.
Juan,
Appreciate it.
good to see you, sir.
Yeah, I was in the house. I was in the house, baby.
I know when you came on, baby. I know when you came on.
Yeah. This was great, man. This was great.
I appreciate it, man.